In this week's parasha, Parashat Ki Tezeh, at the very end of the parasha, Moshe Rabbeinu retells us the story of when Amalek attacked us. Now, we first read about this back in Sefer Shemot. They're the first nation to attack us when they're in the desert. These evil Reshaim really did terrible things, attacking the back of the bus. Terrible, terrible, terrible story with Amalek. Moshe Rabbeinu now retells us the story in our parasha, in Parashat Ki Tezeh. We're actually going to use this version of the story in Parashat Zachor. We're going to take out 2 Torahs on the Shabbat before Purim, and we're going to read about Amalek, because we know Haman came from Amalek. We're going to read about Amalek from our parasha, Parashat Ki Tezeh. But interestingly enough, every single year we read this parasha in the month of Elul. I mean, in the real Torah reading cycle, it always falls out that Amalek happens now in Elul time. So in this year's ma'amar of the Shvilei Pinchas, of Pinchas Friedman, the Belzer Rosh Kolel. So he asked the great question. He goes, is there some kind of connection? Like, why does it really happen that way? This is like more Purim kind of stuff. Maybe we could talk about leaving Egypt kind of stuff, but like, what does this have to do with Elul? Why did Hashem make it? Why is it that we're reading about Amalek right now in the summertime in the month of Elul? Okay, so let's go to the story real quick about Amalek. And we're going to ask another question that the Shvilei Pinchas says. So we start off. Remember what Amalek did to you guys on your journey on the derech when you left Mitzrayim. Asher karecha baderech, that they chilled, they made cold, they brought you down baderech on your way. And they surprised the back of the bus. It's interesting, Rashi over here, that they cut off the Brit Milah of the people that they attacked. And you were tired and famished. V'lo yareh Elohim, and you were, and then there's a question, and they didn't fear God, and we didn't fear God? And according to one approach is that the Jews that were attacked were actually Jews who were not in the closest connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, and then it goes on that ultimately we have a mitzvah to never forget what Amalek did. But ask the Shvilei Pinchas. If you noticed, and I tried to madgish the Hebrew, it says that remember what Amalek did to you, baderech, and then it says asher karecha baderech. Why does it mention the word derech twice? Look what they did to you on the road. They cooled you down on the road. Why baderech twice? Okay, so says the Shvilei Pinchas as follows. David HaMelech teaches us a deep idea in Tehillim. The very beginning of Tehillim, David HaMelech tells us, Ki yodea Adonai derech tzadikim, the derech reshaim toved. He says that Hashem knows the derech, the path of the tzadikim, and the derech reshaim, the path of the reshaim, that's going to become destroyed. That's going to be done with. So basically, what do we see from here? There are 2 drachim. We have in our pasuk 2 derechs. Amalek is coming on both derechs. Says David HaMelech, there are 2 paths in life. There's the derech tzadikim, and there's the derech reshaim. And he says that he brings down also the Shvilei Pinchas that the Arizal speaks about that the way to get to the derech tzadikim, there is this other derech that's like right next to it. It's called the derech of tshuva. And the Shvilei Pinchas brings a lot more sources in the Torah that speaks of the word derech, hinting to derech tshuva. So I know there's a path of the tzadikim, there's a path of the balei tshuvas, but it seems to be on the good path of derech. It hints to derech tshuva. According to the Shvilei Pinchas, you can read the Ma'amar for all of his sources for that. Okay. Then says the Shvilei Pinchas, just like there's a positive derech for tshuva, there's also a negative derech to get us further away from tshuva, to get us closer to sin. Not only to make us not do tshuva, but to get us to actually even sin. So we have these 2 paths in life, these 2 drachim. This is Rabbi Yochanan in the Gemara on his deathbed. He speaks about the derech to Gan Eden and the derech to Gehenom. That we really have these paths in life. And when we're in the month of Elul, when we're in the month getting ready for the Yamim Noraim, for the Yom Adin, for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur, so we start getting into this, a little more black and white kind of stage. We know the world is really very, very gray. And but when it comes to paths and when it comes to choices and free will, we do have good choices and we do have bad choices. We have a derech of the tzaddikim, and we have the derech of the Reshaim. Says the Shvilei Pinchas, Elul is the month that opens up a clearer path. It gets rid of the bushes that were blocking the way. It makes the derech of teshuvah much easier to go onto. And with this, he says we can come back to our original question. Why do we read about Amalek every year in Elul? So it says, Asher karecha baderech. What was Amalek trying to do? They were trying to cool us down in our derech. What derech? The derech of teshuvah. Here we are in the month of Elul, where we're waking up, we're trying to do our slichot, we're trying to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what happens? Amalek comes to our derech teshuvah and tries to cool us down. Asher karecha baderech. Now ask the Shvilei Pinchas. We learn in the Midrash Tanchuma, we've spoken about this a lot in the past. Who were the Neheshalim? Who were those weak ones in the back that were attacked? So the Midrash explains that it was the tribe of Dan. Dan were the weak ones spiritually, and they had messed up earlier with Avodah Zarah, and therefore they were kicked out of the Ananei HaKavod, they were kicked out of the clouds. That's why they didn't have that special protection of the clouds, and Amalek is the one attacking the tribe of Dan. So as the Shvili Pinchas, but understand, why go after the tribe of Dan? They're already sinners. They were already kicked out of the clouds. They're already exiled. Go after the tzaddikim. Go after the beinonim. Why are you going after, get the more righteous ones to sin? Why are you going after the sinners? So he says, based on what we said right now, it makes a lot of sense. Because the main goal of Amalek is Asher Karacha Baderech. He's trying to cool down the path of Teshuvah. So he's dafka attacking the tribe of Dan, who right now is post-sin, and it's in that zone of beginning to do Teshuvah, trying to do their Teshuvah, and he's trying to stop them from doing teshuvah. We mentioned there's a very interesting Rashi of Vayizanev Becha, that when they attack the back of the people that were in the corners of Vayizanev is also language of a zanav, like a tail. So he learns this interesting midrash that Amalek cut off the Brit Milot, they made a circumcision of Dan and threw it up in the air. It's a crazy teaching. What's it all about? Says the Shvilei Pinchas, learn this idea a lot more symbolically for the month of Elul. What do Chazal tell us we're supposed to do in the month of Elul? We're supposed to circumcise our hearts in teshuvah, and it's based on a pasuk we're going to read a little bit later on in Sefer Devarim, Perek Lamed. It says over there, Umal Hashem Elokecha levavecha ve'levav zarecha. It says that Hashem is going to circumcise our hearts and the hearts of our children. Le'ahavat Hashem Elokecha, to love God b'chol levavecha b'chol nafshecha, with all of our hearts and with all of our soul. So the idea is that we're supposed to circumcise our hearts. Come along the rabbis, and the rabbis say, oh look, very interesting, we're supposed to circumcise our hearts. Et levavecha ve'levav zarecha, we're supposed to circumcise the hearts, our hearts, and Hashem is going to circumcise our hearts and our kids' hearts, and we're supposed to do it from down below as well. Et levavecha, the et levav is the first letters of Elul, and that's the hint that in Elul, our job is to do a brit milah on our hearts, which is a language of Chazal, symbolic of open ourselves up, open up our hearts to teshuvah. So says the Shvilei Pinchas, that's why Amalek is trying to stop our derech of teshuvah. So what do? They're trying to cut off the brit milah of Dan, symbolizing you have no right to do teshuvah. But Baruch Hashem, we know that we do have the right to teshuvah. We know that the gates of teshuvah are never going to be closed, and that's why we read in our parasha every year about the evil Amalek, their attempts to stop our derech to teshuvah, but ultimately we win, we defeat them, and it's really with the help of the whole Jewish people who are going to go and step it up. Yoshua is going to gather the rest of the tribe to go and fight for the tribe of Dan, and together with our unity, we're going to fight back, put our eyes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Moshe Rabbeinu raises his hands to the heavens and defeat Amalek, and now we have a mitzvah to never forget that we won and that they have to be defeated. Shabbat Shalom.